It's always about the Leafs, isn't it? Let's go over onto an article published by Pierre LeBrun yesterday on The Athletic as to the NHL Trade Board 2022-2023. Bo Horvat tops our initial list of 25 players to watch. This was published by the Athletic staff on December 15th, so not necessarily Pierre LeBrun, but it's kind of Pierre LeBrun because he's the guy that writes this individual part of the article. Now, I don't like to do this, mostly because The Athletic is paid for material, but the part that we are talking about was indeed screenshotted and posted onto Twitter by Editor-in-J Account for Hockey, and it did gain a lot of traction, so because it's available here in a public forum, if you happen to be following this guy on Twitter, I'm going to screenshot his tweet instead, because it kind of accomplishes the same thing. We're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we're talking about St. Louis Blues center Ryan O'Reilly, and how Pierre LeBrun writes that he thinks the Leafs have discussed acquiring O'Reilly internally. Take a look at what Pierre LeBrun writes on the article. He's the 5th ranked player on the 2022-2023 Athletic Trade Watch list. Not that I think anything is imminent, we're only in December after all, but my sense this week after talking to a few NHL teams is that they expect the Blues to listen in on offers for pending UFA captain Ryan O'Reilly in the new year. The Blues continue to play inconsistent hockey, and it's not giving anyone confidence that the season will get back on track. I think the Maple Leafs have talked about O'Reilly internally. Whether that leads to showing interest with the Blues in the new year, we shall see. Like with Bo Horvat, the Avalanche would make sense too. Okay, that's funny. O'Reilly back to the Avalanche? Oh man, we might have to make a video about that. Heck, let's make this video about that too. Yeah. I mean, any contender should have interest in the 2019 NHL Playoff MVP, Pierre LeBrun writes. And so let's go over Ryan O'Reilly, talk about the impact he has had so far in the 2022-2023 season, and what these teams could potentially be looking for when it comes to O'Reilly and his services. So, Ryan O'Reilly, as we all kind of know, 31 years old, 6'1", 216 left-handed center, signed till the end of this season, making $7.5 AAV. That contract is expiring, so there's an opportunity here for a playoff contender to go out there and acquire O'Reilly in some sort of a salary retained kind of deal if the Blues decide that their playoff run is chalked and they just kind of want to get assets for this guy because it's not really all too guaranteed that he's going to be sticking around anyway. Sure, he's the captain of the squad, but like we're seeing with Dylan Larkin, like we're seeing with Bo Horvat, pending UFA captains that happen to be centers and are very capable, I guess, not really all too guaranteed as to whether or not they're going to be sticking around. O'Reilly this season has 15 points in 30 games played, on pace for 41 in 82 games, which is a pretty steep decline from what he had last season. I mean, 58 points in 78 games played. He was a point per game for the Blues in the playoffs. He always comes alive in the playoffs, and that's been a really good pattern that he has showcased throughout the past few years in his career. He's a very good two-way center. He can win a ton of faceoffs, he's great at the defensive zone draws, and the offensive side of his game gets boosted with the importance of the game he is playing in. The more important the game, the better Ryan O'Reilly plays, and you can see that totally throughout the past few years, especially in the playoff run that in which saw the St. Louis Blues win the Stanley Cup in 2018-19. That is when really Ryan O'Reilly put himself on the map as a top-tier center in the National Hockey League, being under a point per game, getting 77 points. Before then, he was always seen as a really good guy. It's just he was never really that bona fide first-line caliber player whose reputation around the league was held up as such. But O'Reilly has always been a very consistent 50 to 60 point guy. It's just this season, of course, he's on pace for 41 points on an inconsistent St. Louis Blues team, so you could totally understand if the Blues sometime in the new year would be interested in trading him away and getting some future assets. As for the Toronto Maple Leafs, if you're making a trade for Ryan O'Reilly, you are likely going out there and having some salary retained, which makes it even more difficult for you to do your job in trading something away to St. Louis to make it worth it. You're probably looking at Kerfoot because, of course, Kerfoot is always involved in trade rumors like these, and you're talking about some other stuff too because Ryan O'Reilly is very important and very valuable. But at the end of the day, if you get this trade and you pull it off with Matthews, Tavares, and O'Reilly as your 1, 2, 3, I mean, that's a pretty good center core. It's probably the best in the league if you do that, and I feel like Ryan O'Reilly playing third-line minutes, you give him only the defensive responsibility role on a Maple Leafs team that is just clawing and itching for a second-round playoff berth. I mean, you have Matthews and Tavares going out there and doing all the scoring. You have O'Reilly for every defensive zone draw, and he could probably chip in on offense once in a while, too. It's a formula for success, and he's a lot better than Alex Kerfoot is as well, so obviously you could understand why this is an idea here. Plus the fact that O'Reilly is from Ontario, there's more connections than one, and I feel like if the Toronto Maple Leafs really did decide to full send and go for Ryan O'Reilly, it would make a lot of Maple Leafs fans quite happy. Of course, though, there's the return. If the Blues really want to start capitalizing on the future, they want to talk about younger guys they have in their lineup. Pavel Buchnevich is still over here. You have other younger pieces like Jake Neighbors and Jimmy Snuggerud. You might want to go out there and get some of the top prospects the Maple Leafs have. The Leafs don't have too many top-tier caliber prospects, but the ones they do have I like a lot. Of course, Rodion Amirov is a guy that I think is just a product of very unfortunate circumstance, but even beyond Amirov, Matthew Nyes is in there, Topi Niemela is in there, of course you still have Nick Robertson, who's been up and down this season. Of course he's on it down right now because he's hurt. But then you go over to the other teams that are involved here, the Colorado Avalanche. Oh boy. The Avalanche making sense for Ryan O'Reilly? Reunite this guy with his old team? Ryan O'Reilly was drafted by the Colorado Avalanche back in 2009, and it was interesting because he was a second-round pick who made the team immediately after getting drafted. And it's not even like he was an overager or nothing, nah. He was born in 1991, drafted 18 years later, and he made the NHL right away. It didn't take him long to have his first 55-point campaign in the NHL with the Avs, and then in 2013-14, he started to break out. 64 points in 80 games played, 55 points in 82 games played. The Avalanche started to decline, so he got traded over to Buffalo, where he was a really good player over there. And then we remember he went over to St. Louis, he won the Cups, etc., etc. Like Matt Duchene, Ryan O'Reilly was a part of a Colorado Avalanche team that had built such an identity for themselves before their absolute travesty season in 2016-17. Cale Makar was the prize that they got in that season's worth of play, but sticking it out with them was Gabriel Landeskog, Nathan MacKinnon, Mikko Rantanen made his debut with the team shortly in this time span too, and so taking a look at some of the older Avs and adding them back to a current squad that, when fully healthy, is still one of the best in the NHL, it seems kind of like a pipe dream in my opinion, but I'd kind of like to see that. I'd love to see Ryan O'Reilly suit up as a second-line center, the Nazem Kadri replacement behind Nathan MacKinnon. Talk about passing the torch. Talk about Avalanche fans back in 2013-14 saying, hey, Ryan O'Reilly is one of our best players, and Nathan MacKinnon is a hot young rookie, 18 years old, making his debut with the team. You still had Matt Duchene on the team at that time, not to mention Paul Stastny, but this was an era ago, a decade ago. Let's see Colorado go out there and reunite O'Reilly with a team of younger guys that are now grown up, older, they've won championships, and Nathan MacKinnon is now the top-paid player in the NHL. I feel like there's such a cool, intriguing, what goes around comes around type of story here. And of course, you know, we made the video about the Leafs. We talked about the Leafs, and the Leafs are always the Leafs, so everything is about the Leafs, right? Did I mention the Leafs? So I could understand if most of the comments are talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, saying, hey, Ryan O'Reilly could be a good fit here. They could play him behind Matthews and Tavares. They could give him the defensive shutdown role, and he could also contribute offense. But then again, I mean, if everything works out in the ways that it can, O'Reilly would probably be a little bit more useful on a Colorado Avalanche team that lacks Nazem Kadri and has MacKinnon and Newhook as their top two centers, but at the end of the day, either trade would work, and either trade would probably provide the St. Louis Blues with significant value heading over the other way. It just really depends on what offer they think is better. So thoughts in the comment section below about the idea of Ryan O'Reilly heading over to either the Colorado Avalanche or the Toronto Maple Leafs, and whether or not the Blues could accept some sort of a trade for their captain. Thinking about it now, the Blues are kind of in a really similar situation with the Canucks. With Horvat and O'Reilly, it's just Bo Horvat has priced himself out of Vancouver. O'Reilly has not really been playing out too great. You kind of need to capitalize on what O'Reilly has shown off in the past, and just hope that playoff O'Reilly comes out to play in the best way possible, because we know he is capable of that. But thoughts in the comments either way, all your thoughts about O'Reilly, the Avalanche, the Leafs. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.